Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret Burke, and I am the Education USA advisor in Costa Rica, in San Jose, Costa Rica. And today we will be talking about the game plan to financing your undergraduate studies, things to consider when you're looking, and much more. So we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover today. So just a quick overview of our agenda. First, I'm going to teach you some key terminology in terms of talking about financial aid, the different types of institutions that we have and what that means in terms of financial aid, in-state and out-of-state tuition. We'll give you some resources to help you look and questions you should be asking yourself while you're looking. And then at the end, we will be talking about how you can apply. Since this is a recorded session, we will not be having questions and answers, but if you do have any questions about this material today or this content, I encourage you to go to educationusa.state.gov and reach out to the nearest Education USA Advising Center and ask your questions. We are more than happy to help and answer any questions you may have along the way as you apply to accredited US colleges and universities. So, moving forward, talking about some terminology at the undergraduate level, the most popular and sought after word is scholarships, which is money awarded to the student that you do not have to pay back. It is essentially their funds given to you with the hope that you fulfill your requirements. They could be taken away if you are not fulfilling academic or sports requirements, but you do not have to pay these funds back. That is the important thing to keep in mind. We also have something called work study, which is something that a university can offer to you where you will work on campus, on a campus job, maybe in a coffee shop or a library, and they suspect that you will make that amount of money. So if you are given on your financial aid offer, it says work study $2,000, that does not mean they're going to give you $2,000. That means that you will be given somewhat of preference when looking for jobs. And when you get a job, they suspect that you will make around $2,000 a year working, right? You may make less if you do not get the hours that you hope for, or you may make a little more. Just keep in mind the maximum amount that you can work on an F1 visa is 20 hours. So it's not going to be a lot more because you can't be working 40 hours a week, for example, during the normal semester. So it's an estimation of money that you would earn. And when you are looking for jobs on campus, there are certain jobs that give preference to students that have this work-study condition. So that means if there are candidates and there's one candidate that has work-study condition and another candidate that does not, if that job has to give preference, then they would ideally give preference to the student with work-study. So it's not just free money, you have to work for it, but that's basically what work-study is. We also have loans. Loans are money that is given to the student but must be paid back at a later time. Most loans ask you to pay them back after you have completed your studies, but each loan will have their unique requirements and rules as to how and when you have to pay them back, right? Grants are money awarded to you by a government organization, and you do not have to give the money back, but they do have specific rules and regulations about how the money can be spent, right? We also have the word financial aid, but I want to emphasize here, a lot of times people think that financial aid is the same thing as scholarships. No, financial aid is the term used to include all of these possible options: scholarships, work study, loans, grants, okay? So when someone says that they received financial aid, that does not necessarily mean they received all scholarships, right? It can be a mix of scholarships and loans, a mix of scholarships, work study, grants, and loans, right? So financial aid is the general term for economic support offered to students. And finally, a word that is sometimes heard is sponsor, which is a person or organization that has made the commitment to pay for part of or all of someone's studies, right? So this could be a company, this could be the government in your country. It is the entity that is responsible for paying for your studies, okay? So, moving forward, we're going to talk about the types of financial aid that we have at U.S. universities and colleges. The first type is merit-based aid, and this is for merit, right? So this can be for your competitive and strong grades in high school, or your strong results on the SAT or ACT, your volunteering, your extracurricular activities, your leadership, right? This could also be through sports, a sports scholarship, or an artistic scholarship. However, it's important to keep in mind that artistic scholarships are typically given to students who plan to study that specific area. So for example, if you are looking for a bachelor's in dance, then you could apply to institutions that have dance departments, and you may receive a dance scholarship because you will be in the dance program, right? But a lot of times students ask me, well, I play the violin, so will I get a scholarship for playing the violin? Unless you are applying to study the violin as your bachelor's degree at some kind of artistic institution, it is not likely that you will be given any type of merit-based aid for you playing the violin, right? And the other type is called need-based aid. And these are scholarships, grants, work study, loans that can be given to you when they see that your economic profile and they realize how much your parents can or cannot pay for your studies, okay? So they take into consideration if your parents are married, divorced, single, if you have other brothers and sisters who are studying in college or in private schools and your parents have to pay for that, if you guys have your own home or if you're renting a home, if you guys help with your grandparents economically, these are all things they take into consideration to have a better idea of how much your parents could pay for your studies in the United States. And here, a lot of times people are confused as to, okay, so does every university offer merit-based and need-based? Not necessarily. We have many different options in the United States. We have some universities that only offer merit-based aid, okay, for international students. We have some that only offer need-based aid for international students. We have some that offer both merit-based and need-based aid for international students, and we have some that do not offer any type of financial aid to international students. In those cases, in order to attend, the student would have to show that they have the full price tag money amount to be able to attend, right? And here there's an asterisk on the word international because we do realize that many international students are dual citizens and they may have US citizenship. If you have US citizenship, it's a little different because you can apply for financial aid through the US government through FAFSA. So we encourage you to reach out to your Education USA advisor for more information about how to apply as a US citizen. However, for international students, it's a different process. So we're talking today more focusing on international students who do not have US citizenship, right? So moving forward, let's talk about the types of institutions because certain institutions can offer certain types of scholarships, okay? So first we have public institutions, which are institutions that receive funds from the government. This can be the state government or the national government, right? In each state in the United States, we have the Ohio government, but we also have the US government as a whole. And this includes community colleges and four-year institutions at the bachelor's level, right? And it's important here to note that public institutions have different prices for people that live inside of the state and people that live outside of the state. And that is referred to as in-state and out-of-state tuition, which I will give you an example on the next page. We also have private institutions, which are universities or colleges that do not receive direct funding from the government as their principal source of funding. This funding can be from donations. It can be from the alumni that has already graduated from this institution and wants to give back to the institution, and the money earned from the students paying tuition and various things throughout the year, right? The total price for a private institution before any scholarships are given or any financial aid is the same for everyone, right? It's the same price for a US student, for a international student, for someone who lives in Ohio or someone who lives in Florida, it is the same price. Whereas with public institutions, it's different because it depends on where you live, okay? So let's talk about in-state and out-of-state tuition. I'm going to use my personal example. I am from the United States. I'm from Ohio, which is that that I put there with the orange arrow. And because of this, so when I was in high school, I was living in my parents' house with my parents. My parents were Ohio residents. They have a home in Ohio. They live in Ohio. They work in Ohio. They pay taxes to Ohio. And those taxes are given to the Ohio government. And in turn, part of the money is given to the public universities and colleges in Ohio. So as a result, I receive a special price at public universities in Ohio because of this. But if I had wanted to go to a public university in California, because I want to go, I want to be on the coast, I want to see what California is like, I would have to pay a different price because I am not a California resident. I am not living in California. My parents are not living in California. My parents are not paying taxes in California, right? So I would not receive the same price. So we're going to look at an example. In my case, I did attend a public institution in Ohio. And here's an example of a large public institution, university in Ohio. For a in-state tuition and fees, or for an Ohio resident, they at this institution would pay about $11,000 per year. Okay, whereas someone who is an out-of-state person, which would be anyone who is not an Ohio resident, or international students. So it could be someone from Michigan, someone from Florida, someone from Costa Rica, someone from Mexico. These are all considered out of state because they're not residents of the state, okay? They would pay the price of about $33,500 per year, okay? So it's a pretty big difference. Here, though, I want to remind you that this is for tuition. This is for your classes and the fees, whereas room and board is the same price for everyone. And room and board refers to the price of living in the dorms, in the residence halls, and your meal plans, right? That is the same for everyone. There's no different pricing for someone because they're international or a US student. They obviously have different options. If you want to live in a single room, that will be more expensive than having a roommate, okay? But this price difference refers to tuition, okay? And so it's a pretty big difference, right? And in my case, I went to a public institution in Ohio because as many US citizens do, we look for that discount and we look for in-state tuition because it's a big difference in price, right? However, I want to mention here, while in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition is typically that is something that applies to US citizens and residents only, there are some universities or states that can offer in-state tuition to international students, okay? So I encourage you to reach out to your Education USA advisor to see if they know of any specific universities or any specific states that can offer you as an international student in-state tuition. I'd give you an example. In Florida, there's a program called the Florida Costa Rica Linkage Institute, which is an external scholarship that Costa Ricans can apply to. And with that, they can receive in-state tuition at public universities in the state of Florida. Okay, so those are the type of things that your Education USA advisor would know about, which is why we encourage you to reach out to them. Now we're going to give you three examples of institutions and the things to keep in mind when considering the types of institutions when looking for universities. First, we have Harvard University, which is a private university, 4 years for a bachelor's degree, that has a cost of about $80,000 per year at the undergraduate level. This price can be a little different depending on how much you spend on travel and personal expenses, right? But this is an estimation from their website. And here, this is an institution that can give need-based aid to international students. Why do I emphasize that? Because there are not a lot of universities that can give need-based aid to international students. It's more probable for an international student to receive merit-based aid than need-based aid, but there are some, and Harvard is one of them. So what does this mean? If you apply to Harvard and you get into Harvard, which is quite difficult as many of us know, and you come from a low socioeconomic background, meaning that your parents do not have much or any money to pay for your studies, if you're able to get into Harvard, then in theory, you could receive a very generous scholarship offer from Harvard because they give need-based aid, right? They give you financial aid depending on your economic profile and not your grades or your activities, right? The next example we have is the University of Arizona, which is a public institution of 4 years as well. It is less expensive than the private university, but it's still very expensive. And here it's very important to keep in mind that public universities cannot give need-based aid to international students, right? They can give merit-based aid, but they cannot give need-based aid. And this merit-based aid has a maximum, right? You will typically not see a full scholarship opportunity from a public institution for an international student, right? That is not something that's common. So if you're looking at public institutions, you should be considering the fact that you will very likely have to pay for part of your education. And finally, we have an example of a community college, which, as many of you may know, community colleges are options where you can study 2 years, your associates, and later transfer if you hope to transfer, or you can do 2-year technical degree. And they are discounted. They're a very economic option, right? So they're cheaper, as you can see, than the other 2 options. However, it's important to keep in mind that community colleges do not typically offer many scholarships because they already have very low prices. And the scholarships that they do offer are for amounts that will not make a very big difference at the end of the day. So maybe $500, $1,000, maybe $2,000, but you will not find a scholarship from a community college that's $10,000, right? Community colleges already have discounted prices. So we typically like to say, when you look on the website, the price that you see on the community college website is the price that you will have to pay. You may get a little bit of extra help from some type of scholarship, but remember, those scholarships are very low scholarships. So resources for when you're searching for universities, now that you understand how the scholarships work and the types of scholarships. We recommend you use educationusa.state.gov. We have a lot of resources there. For step 1, which is looking for your universities and considering the climate, the size, the things you like, the things you don't like, we have a worksheet called Define Your Priorities, which is online, it's free. We recommend you could use the following search engines, which would be College Board, Peterson's, College Navigator, Princeton, College Insight, CAPEX, or the institution's website itself is the most up-to-date information. It's important to look at the institution's website because universities can change their budgets each year, which means that their scholarship opportunities could change. And so it's important to be checking the direct website of the university to make sure that you have the correct information and the types of financial aid they can offer and the amount of financial aid that they can offer. So when you're looking for your universities and colleges, we recommend using an Excel or a notebook. And here are some suggested categories to keep in mind when you're looking for these universities and colleges. But I would like to highlight 3 specific parts because we want you to consider a lot of things when looking for colleges and universities, but at the end of the day, cost is a very important factor for many students. If you cannot afford to go, you may not go. So here we have 3 categories. Total cost for 1 year, which is, tuition, room and board, everything. The maximum amount of scholarships offered by the university. What is the most that they could offer you? Is it 15,000? Is it 40,000? Or do they do 100% of demonstrated need? And then the potential cost covered by my family, which would be the total cost minus the maximum possible scholarship. If that number here is not a number that your parents could pay, then this is not a realistic option for you, right? So, questions to ask yourself when you're looking for universities. The most important question is if this university offers scholarships for international students. As I mentioned, there are universities that do not offer scholarships. And I have had students come to me for help and they're excited and they find a university they like, maybe in California or maybe in Indiana. And we're looking on the website and I say, okay, but right here it says they don't give scholarships to international students. Can your family afford this? And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. So this is the most important question is 1, do they give scholarships to international students? 2, if they do, what kind? Do they give need-based or merit-based or both? If it's merit-based, what is the maximum amount? Most universities will have like a table that will tell you if you have this GPA and this SAT, this is the possible amount you could get. If you're a little bit lower, this is how much you could get, right? If it's need-based, what is the maximum amount? I encourage you to ask the university directly, what does that mean? Are we talking $2,000 or are we talking a larger amount, right? If you see on the website that they mention the word FAFSA, remember that the FAFSA is for US citizens. That is not something that would pertain to an international student, so you have to be careful there. So here is an example of that worksheet of that Excel that I just mentioned. We're going to look at some examples here. So here's a university that costs $60,000 a year, and according to their website, the most they could give you, and I think in this case would probably be merit-based aid, is $45,000 a year. So if this student were to get the maximum scholarship that they offer, which we cannot guarantee, their parents and them would still have to pay $15,000. In this case, we have a university, looking at the price, it looks like a community college, right? And the maximum scholarship that they give is $1,500. So subtracting those, can your parents pay $23,900? If they cannot, then that's not a good option for you. We have another one that, in this case, they use the phrase that they cover 100% of demonstrated need. That means that the university will ask you for information and come up with a estimation using a formula of how much your parents could pay for, and they will give you the difference. So in this case, this is a university that costs $72,300. Let's say that they think that your parents could pay $2,300 a year. That means that they should give you the scholarship for $70,000, right? It depends on what they consider to be your need, okay? How do I apply for financial aid? That's the biggest question. Most universities will automatically consider you for financial aid when you apply for admission. So when you apply to get into the university, first they decide if you get in or not, and then if they have merit-based aid, they will decide how much that you will be given, right? If it's offered to international students. For the universities who offer need-based aid, they are going to ask you to fill out most likely the CSS profile, which is an economic application or portal where you fill out all the information about your family. How much do your parents make? Are they married or divorced or separated? How many people live in your house? How much do you guys spend on electricity, on water, on food? And they use all of this information to come up with a number which they believe your parents could pay each year for college, right? Some universities may have a specific program, like a special full scholarship program or a special scholarship for engineers that requires a separate a separate application. So you do have to research on the website and make sure, because for example, let's say that the University of Kansas has an International Excellence Award, which is a separate scholarship that international students would have to apply for. If that application is due February 1st, then you should apply to the university before February 1st, right? Because you have to apply 1 to the university and 2 to that extra special program, okay? So those are the things to keep in mind. Finding other sources of financial aid. Please keep in mind that the majority of your funds should and will come directly from the university. You can check in your country to see if there are any private or government organizations that give financial aid to international students to study. But there are countries where there's no extra help, which means that you need to get those scholarships directly from the university to be able to go, or do fundraising in your country, in your city. Ask people to donate $5, ask people to donate anything they can, or consider taking out a loan that is available for international students in Latin America and the Caribbean is called the Row Fund, which is up to $15,000, no interest, for your last 2 years of study. So that's an option for a loan. And then you can also look for additional funding. There, I have copied 2 links that include a financial aid guide for U.S. studies from the Row organization. It's divided by country, so you can go and see what financial aid options are available in your country. And also, Education USA state.gov, we go to step 2, which is financing your studies, and there you may see some search engines for different kind of scholarships and the requirements that they need, okay? So you came here today to make a game plan and stick to it. So what should your game plan be? 1, talk to your family and ask them realistically, how much can your parents pay each year for your studies? Okay. Will you have help from your grandma? Will you have help from your aunt? Or are you responsible for paying for your studies? Okay. Research your options and choose realistic options. Consider the amount of money that they can offer you versus the amount you can pay each year. There are not magical, invisible scholarships that are given to you at the end. Okay, so it really hurts me when I have a student that applies to a university that costs $70,000, and the maximum scholarship they can give is $20,000. And so then they come to me and they say, well, I got the scholarship, but I still need 50,000. And I'm thinking, well, this wasn't a realistic option in the beginning. If you knew that they could only give you $20,000, why did you apply? Because there are no magical scholarships that come at the end, right? You have to look and be realistic when you are looking at the universities and think, okay, if I got the maximum offer for financial aid that they have, is it still an option for me and my family's budget? Okay. The third one is apply early. Make sure you apply early in the cycle, apply on time for the financial application, the CSS profile, and apply on time for any special scholarship programs. Remember that there are thousands of students applying, and if you apply 2 days late, they will not make the exception for you. They will say, sorry, all of these other students turned in their things on time, you didn't, so we cannot offer you anything, okay? And while you're waiting for your answers from your universities, be proactive and start to look for additional funding. Think about how you can fundraise. Can you make desserts and sell them in your neighborhood? How can you raise money to help pay for your funds? So a lot of information. Remember that in Education USA, we are here to help you and here to guide you along the way. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have any specific questions about your country or your situation, please go to this link at the bottom, educationusa.state.gov/find advising center, and reach out to the nearest advisor to you. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you found it useful. Stay safe and wash your hands. Thanks, everybody.